Straw Hut Media.
I'm Stephen Markley, and I'm so excited to be here on Don't Be Alone with Jay Kogan.
Don't be alone with Jay Kogan.
Welcome to Don't Be Alone with Jay Kogan. I am Jay Kogan. Today my guest is Stephen Markley, who's written several novels, but among them he wrote this great novel called Deluge, and it is about what's going to happen to all of us if the environment continues to collapse, gets worse and worse and worse, and then what do we do? How do we live our lives? How do we survive? How do millions of starving people eat? How do people, who are displaced, where do they get supposed to go? What's going to happen politically with people fighting each other for resources? And also just the environment. It's boiling hot. It's not great. And so I'm expecting this guy to be really, really dour, sad, and kind of a downer. So I'm sorry in advance for bumming you guys out. But it was important for him to be here because I have a lot of fear. And I do fear about the environment. I fear what's going to happen to our world. I fear what's going to happen in, the next 24 hours to me, let alone, just the environment. I want to sort of be free of my fear a little bit. And I want to feel better about the world and better about my future and better about the future of everybody. Because we're living in kind of a shitty time, certainly in show business. Economically, it's been rough on a lot of people. Politically, it's been hard, and socially, it's been hard. And I think it's just a hard time. People are trying to find their footing in a kind of weird new world. And so we'll talk to our guest, Stephen Markley, about all of that, or at least some of that. But I'll be happy to especially talk about the environment stuff because I'm hoping that he'll have some words of wisdom that make me feel less shitty about everything. I want you to do me a favor right now. Stop what you're doing. Subscribe to my show. Subscribe. I don't care where you're listening. Subscribe to that right there. Press like right where you're listening. And then go over to YouTube and press subscribe there, because then I can prove to somebody, especially my mom and dad who listen to the show, that they're not the only audience, that there's more people listening and the show has value. So subscribe. Also, feel free to write me at dbawjk@gmail.com and give me your questions and give me your comments and suggestions for guests, or just tell me how you're doing. I want to connect with you in a real way. And that's why I do this show. So please feel free to write me about anything. It doesn't have to be what I'm asking for. It could be about anything at all. Anyway, thank you for being here. And I think you're going to enjoy this conversation I have with Stephen Markley right after this.
Don't be alone with Jay Kogan.
We don't know each other from Adam.
No.
Okay. But Ryan here, our producer Ryan, said, get this guy on because he's awesome.
It's a fact. Yeah.
Okay, go. No? Is that too steps?
I can't just start tap dancing.
Just
I need the
do
prompt.
the thing. Dance monkey. Well, I can tell already that you're awesome because I did some research. I didn't read your book.
No.
But I read other things and other stuff, and that you have this first interesting novel. It's a memoir that takes place in one day?
No.
No?
No.
That's what I read.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet.
What is it? What is the...
It's a book about me trying to publish the book.
I see.
That is about itself, yeah.
Okay. So it's about you trying to publish a book.
Yes.
But you hadn't already tried to publish it yet because...
it's a book about its own creation.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
And did you get major acclaim for that book?
No, nobody read it. And
oh, wow.
It quickly died. And
what made you decide, I'm going to write another book?
Well, I just think if you're a writer, you're sort of compelled to keep going no matter what. It's not about the finished product. It's about the process.
I'm a writer, and I'm not compelled no matter what. Especially if I don't think it's going to sell.
Cold
or anything.
And calculated for the money.
No, it's like I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of things I want to write, but it's hard to write.
Yeah, no, I don't find it hard to write. I find it hard to live the life of writing.
What is that life?
Well, it's always unstable, right? Like you're always trying to find your footing, no matter sort of which industry you're in. You're trying to find that continuous paycheck, that lifestyle that allows you to keep going.
Right.
I think that's actually the most difficult.
So like
part
the gypsy life aspect of being a writer, that's the hard part.
Yeah,
the sitting down to write for 3, 4, 5 hours a day, that's not the hard part.
Yeah, that basically is the only thing that gives me any joy at all. So
really,
yeah, that's the part I love. Right.
Wow. All right. Well. You and I kind of approach writing from two totally separate things. I write so that I can then work with a bunch of people and make the thing.
Sure.
That's what TV writers do. I write in success. I get to work with so many incredibly talented people and make the thing.
Totally.
Which, I mean, you write for TV as well, right?
Yes, that is new to me, and I've just sort of started that journey in the last few years. And I think like
if it's for me, I'm not here.
It's transitioning from writing novels, which is entirely a solo project, a solo endeavor, where you're just in your own head at the keyboard. It's all on you. To working with other people has been both like a total joy, but also like a difficult transition in terms of giving up power over the finished product.
Yeah, it is really TV writing is not like, this auteur business where you're just you are alone with your thoughts and all the changes are yours and all the fixes are yours and all the ideas are yours. It's a different world.
And wrenching out of your head that sense of authorship. It's like when you see the byline on a television show created by, written by, et cetera, directed by. Right. It's like this still represents an enormous collaboration.
Right.
Where the individual whose name is there might like have done 20 to 30% of the actual thing that ends up in the episode.
That's why credits are very deceptive.
Yeah.
Speaking of credits, let me introduce you specifically. I've already probably introduced you before we got here, but I'm going to say it again. So your name is Stephen Markley, right?
That is correct.
And you're a very famous, in my world, very famous author. Okay, because you've written this book, Deluge.
Yes.
Right? We see this? Okay. And it has this book, unlike the first book, has gotten some acclaim.
Yeah, well, there's a book in between there, Ohio, that sort of set me off on my way.
Okay,
and sort of like launched the second, more successful part of my career.
Okay,
and this recent one has been the work of 12 years and. Obviously, a lot of
feels like 12 years worth of work.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Do you write long and then cut down?
I do. It was
so this
much
was
longer.
Like this,
yes,
and then get to here. Oh my God!
It ended at about 900 pages. It started at about 15.
Wow.
100. Yeah.
That is how I write too. I write long and then I cut down.
It was 2 years of doing that, and it did drive me a little bit over the edge.
Yeah. I mean, and I hope that you had a wonderful editor helping you.
I did. My editor at Simon & Schuster, Stuart Roberts, he was very patient and just a really astute reader of the text.
Let me ask you something. Who do you like better, Simon or Schuster?
I never met either of them.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know. So the editor really helped you. How do you find an editor who you think you're simpatico with, you're on the same wavelength?
You don't really find them, they find you. It's sort of like whoever will take your book is like who you're going to end up with.
Right.
And actually my first editor on Ohio had transitioned to another line of work. And so Stuart and I were sort of thrust together. But this was somebody I worked with more closely than anyone in my life. And he since has moved on to HarperCollins. But it was an incredibly fruitful 2 years. And he had, one major note, which is like, this book is awesome. It needs to move like a freight train. It needs to move like a thriller. Like it's so dense. It has so much information, so much science. It has to feel to the reader as if it's just hurtling.
Right.
And that sort of note propelled me into the edit in like a really wonderful way.
So this book, Deluge, is about what is going to happen to our environment and the people in it. And we, from before now until around 2030?
2039 is when the last date of the book. But it's basically about the climate crisis, but about not just that environmental catastrophe, but the social, political, and economic ramifications of it.
Right.
So what it will feel like to live inside of this hurtling meteor.
We'll talk about that in a second. This show, I usually talk to people about my problems.
Oh, totally.
And so I'm going to talk to you.
I'm here for you.
I'm here. This is about my problem. My problem is I'm worried about the environment.
Sure.
But I feel like nothing I can do will matter.
Yeah, I mean, that's not true. No, it's I get though where you're coming from. I feel like one of the hardest pieces of this to grapple with is the sense of sort of hopelessness and it all being out of our hands.
Like
right?
I recycle and then I hear the recycling, they take the same recycling that they take and they throw it together with the other garbage and that just gets piled up into some other thing.
Totally.
It's performative.
Exactly. And I think like that element, I love that word, by the way, that element of like sort of performative environmentalism is something that we're not like, just grasping for straws here. It's like been taught to us.
Right.
Who has it been taught to us by? It's all the polluting industries.
Right.
Like you go back to look at the first anti-littering campaigns in New York and like when Coke was first coming out with bottles and it was all sponsored by Coke because they wanted to keep producing littering bottles. Right. Similarly, in the climate crisis, you have a bunch of oil companies who spent decades sort of telling us, watch your carbon footprint, Jay. Watch what you're doing with your car. Drive less, fly,
Right.
all this sort of stuff to get us insane and make everybody else furious who doesn't want to live like that.
Right.
Meanwhile, creating sort of an infrastructure where they can just keep polluting endlessly. And so grappling with that this is like at its core a political problem and not an us problem is sort of like the threshold we're crossing over right now.
If it's a political problem, what's the political solution?
People are working on it. And I think like that's the good news is that in the last 5 years, the prices of renewable energy have fallen so quickly and so unexpectedly, really, that sort of like we can see the keyhole that we can squeeze through now, how we can do this to get to the other side of this catastrophe. And recently the Inflation Reduction Act, which is actually a huge climate bill, passed, and that sort of lays out the framework for how the U.S. is going to decarbonize its economy rapidly within the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So this is all in the process of happening.
Environmentalists are mad that it's not big enough.
Yeah,
that it's not there yet and it doesn't really help enough. And
yeah, totally. And I think like you have to look at two things about that. First of all is nothing is big enough, really. Like
Right.
What we need is a planetary cooperative wartime mobilization. That's not like on the table right now. Mm-hmm. So, the Biden administration and some of the folks who work in that administration looked at the problem and were like, how can we get there without using the tools that we need, right? And so you look at the tax code and how to like sort of like just toss money out of the windows on all these states that don't want to decarbonize and suddenly make it economic to decarbonize.
Right.
And it will get us 25 to 40% of the way where we need to be, which is why it's imperative, in my opinion, to vote in this upcoming election so we can push that number to 50%, which is what we need to cut by 2030 to get the rest of the way. That will keep us on track. But if you look at where we were in 2020, like I was writing this novel and just basically like there's no way we're doing this. Like we're headed towards the worst possible future. And the degree to which that bill has changed the outlook is really, really incredible. And if you've worked in this space for 2 decades as I have, it's sort of shocking. I'm still like walking around a little staggered by it.
Well, that's incredible to hear because I've been living in only fear of it and in helpless fear.
Yeah.
Like I feel there's so little to do. We have, we bought an electric car and they find that the electric cars, the batteries are terrible for the environment.
Well, let me stop you there, though, okay? Because this is also a piece of like misinformation that has permeated society that electric vehicles, no matter what, are still loads better for the environment than an ICE engine, than an internal combustion engine.
Okay.
There have been multiple studies that show that like even if you plug an electric vehicle directly into a coal plant, the efficiency of that engine is still going to make it better for the planet. Then. And also you have to remember, the base load power of our society is changing rapidly. Renewable energies are displacing specifically coal at a really rapid rate. So the carbon burden of the energy we're plugging into is going to fall very quickly. That's like the first thing that's going to go.
So if we're unsuccessful in this hope of trying to save the planet, you outline some things that are going to happen in the book that are not so great, right? I mean,
the other route.
The other route. So if we don't do that, we're going to have rising sea tide, right? The rising sea levels, right? And that's going to do damage and eliminate land and change the climate. Like what's going to happen?
I mean, I think that is one of the scariest. Like we look at the wildfires, the storms, the drought, the floods, and that is all very frightening in that it's in the news right away. But the rising sea levels, which is caused obviously by Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting, that, if you think about it, most of the human population lives on the coasts of the world. So where are those people going to go? It's a migration crisis, right? Also, if you're just like a rich homeowner in Miami, you're looking around right now and the king tide flooding, the sunny day flooding is already starting to swamp, where people live, right? Insurance is another
Don't
enormous...
ask me to feel bad for people in Miami.
No, I mean,
I'm not going to feel...
Well, it's just an interesting sort of conundrum because you have like one of the most radical like climate denialist governments of any of the states in Florida, which is under like, basically existential threat right now from what's happening. And I think that sort of the denialism and the terror go hand in hand in that case.
I've spoken to so many people who tell me there is no such thing as a climate crisis, that it's something that's been manufactured for the benefit of, green businesses and the left wing, and that we're generating, and I say I'm kind of lefty, we're generating fear in order to win elections, to collect power, and to send money to our buddies in certain business fields.
Well, what I always say to this is, you do not have to take my word for it.
Right.
You can go look at the documents that ExxonMobil was putting out in the 1970s that say very clearly, if we keep burning our reserves, we're going to cause a global calamity, right? Like, this is well documented that the oil companies themselves, the fossil fuel companies themselves, had all the research showing this would happen. And it's happened exactly as their own science said it would. Now, beginning in the 80s and especially in the 90s, they realized that in order to keep burning all the fossil fuels they wanted to, they were going to put out just like one of the world's great propaganda campaigns to get people to say exactly what you are describing.
Right.
And so you hear this nonsense all the time, and it's really hard to combat because it ends in a thought terminating cliche at every point, right? But to me, it's I can walk anybody through every step of the way why this is happening.
Right.
Science is so simple that if you were to disprove that climate change is happening, you would win every Nobel Prize in the history of the world, because the relationship between carbon and the atmosphere
they've
and warming
stopped
is so
saying
obvious.
that it's not happening, but they have continued to say it's not a man-made crisis. That it's a crisis that if you look at the Earth over millions of years, you'd find temperature changes and climate changes of this kind eventually.
Which is true, but we would be absent industrial civilization. We would be in a cooling period right now. And furthermore, it's like if you were, it would be impossible to prove if we were to add this much carbon to the atmosphere, why the planet wouldn't warm. Like the relationship between carbon, methane, nitrous oxide, and warming the planet is so simple on a basic chemistry and physics level that if it weren't happening, you would have to come up with some impossible theory as to why that was the case.
So you think disaster is coming, and it's undeniable that it's here, and we just have to do stuff about it. So let me ask you something. Do you drive an electric car?
I do now.
Okay.
Just recently.
All right. What did you get?
I got an Ioniq 6 and it's fucking awesome.
All right.
I love it.
All right.
Yeah.
And you charge your supercharger at home or something?
Well, I'm in an apartment building, so I can do it there, but sometimes I just go to a
station.
It's got the free 2 years of Electrify America thing, so I cruise over to one of those and read a book and do it.
Right. Do you eat beef?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though everybody says it's the beef population that's part of what the problem is?
It is. And let me say a couple things. I eat beef. I fly on planes. I don't eat a ton of it, mostly because
Do you eat beef on planes?
Yeah, if I can.
Okay.
That's the perfect place to do it.
Great.
Yeah. But again, it's like this is the formulation that has been created by polluters, which is to say, it's your fault, people.
Right.
It's your fault for living your piggy little lives and doing your thing. We're just giving you what you want.
Right.
We're just giving you what you want, you stupid little pigs. That's what they kind of want. And the head of ExxonMobil recently basically just said that, right? But it's not. We have been locked into these structures of hyperconsumption that sort of direct us towards these choices. And I think furthermore, you hear people on the climate left just excoriating people for eating beef and flying on planes, and it's all your fault too, which I think plays right into the hands of those fossil fuel interests.
Right. I'd like to leave a world for my kid and whoever else follows.
Sure.
That's not misery.
Sure.
And that migrants are not fighting each other for crusts of bread. That's a world that doesn't seem great.
Sure.
All right, but that's a world that you say might be happening.
Well, I think it's with my novel, in the time I spent writing it, things in the book that I would write would start coming true as I was writing the book, right? Both in terms of record temperatures, environmental disasters, political repercussions.
Some things have come true, including the January 6th.
Yeah. No spoilers for the book, but yeah.
Well, spoiler, that's good. And enticement.
It's
not
an
enticement.
That exact thing, but the way I found out about January 6th was one of my few friends who'd read the book to give me notes texted me. I had just gotten back from a run, and he said, "How does it feel to be clairvoyant?"
Right. Now you know what it's like to be a Simpsons writer.
Yeah.
Because having written The Simpsons, people keep telling us, how'd you know? How'd you predict? It's like, we didn't.
As a
didn't predict.
longtime Simpsons fan, yeah, that part is unnerving as well. Yeah.
We did not predict anything. We just wrote a lot of things. And if you write a lot of things,
A volume of things, yeah.
some of those things will come true.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you predicted political unrest.
But the science of the climate crisis is so obvious, right? If you really dig in and look at it, it's so obvious. You can see exactly where the tension points in our society are going to erupt. It's not hard to follow the logic of it, right? And so all I did was follow the science and look at, where is this taking us? What is going to happen?
So you seem very comfortable with like the progress that things are going. I thought you're going to be much more dour, much more upset. I mean, I'm looking for a place to invest my anxiety, and you're giving me nothing here.
Well, it's that thing I was just saying, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, right?
Okay, right.
Like once you understand how scary this is, and it is really fucking scary,
right?
You have a choice, and I made this choice for a while, which is stare at your ceiling at 4 a.m. every night of your life for the duration, which I tried that one.
Right, but I feel like you're telling me to invest my faith in politicians and smart people who are going to come around and make this thing work, because I can't do much as an individual.
Well, you can do it. You can do a bunch. Of course you can.
Well, tell me.
Well, you're doing it right now. I mean, I think like one of the key elements is that, especially in Hollywood, storytelling around climate is basically buried under a layer of bullshit so thick that you can't like ever actually get to what the crux of the problem is. Right. And so just like, you're not a climate podcaster, but you're having this asshole on to sort of like, give his 2 cents about how we get out of this. Like,
well,
I do think storytelling
Big Green
around
made me
the
do
issue.
it.
Yeah,
they held a gun to my head.
The EV industry
Exactly.
is showering you with money right now to get me to come in. Yeah.
They threatened me.
But, I think storytelling and sort of just giving people a baseline of information that is real about this and not filtered through, the scrim of fucking TikTok is important. I could go on about this forever. This is going to be the most boring fucking podcast.
I don't think it's boring. Here's why it's not boring. Because just like a good TV show, the stakes are very high. The stakes of life and death are pretty high, of survival of our species, survival of my kid, survival. It's pretty high.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of sex in this story yet, but we're going to figure it out.
There's a lot of sex in the Deluge, though, to pique people's interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it environmental sex? Did they go to
just regular raw boning?
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. You want them in fields of like solar panels or something,
Maybe for the sequel.
Yeah, all right. Think about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, even with what you're saying, which is things are getting better, at least have a possibility of getting better, and with political activism they can get much better. I don't have faith in the American public to support wise, smart policies to get us where we're going to go. I mean, it seems like the whole vaccination debacle makes me think that no matter what the science says, no matter what's going to be good for all of society, there's going to be millions upon millions of people who are fighting against it for no particular reason.
Okay, well, let's take those one at a time. I mean, I always ascribe to the Winston Churchill statement that America tends to do the right thing just after they've exhausted all other options.
Right.
Like that's I think like exactly accurate. I also would say that the anti-vaccination and sort of the anti-fossil fuel fervent comes from specific policy choices. One of those policies is the way our information ecology has evolved with the advent of surveillance capitalism. The way we intake information is a bunch of people fucking spy on us, and then they use our anxieties and our grief and our loneliness against us to get us freaked out about something that might not even be real.
That's how I got married. So don't put it down.
For sure. I take it all back. And just moving it back to climate, I think like what we're going to see, especially in the next decade, is the investments going into rural America, into red states are incredible. Like we're talking about factories building EV batteries, solar panels, wind turbines. Like that investment is going to turn into jobs and it's going to turn into political power. And so the center of gravity, especially in the Republican Party, has been the fossil fuel industry essentially flooding the space with money to drive out anyone who has an unorthodox opinion, right? And that is going to quickly change as so many communities become invested in clean energy.
All right. Well, I hope that is true. I know that, I live in a bubble
Totally.
And in my bubble, everybody's concerned about the environment. And outside of my bubble, there's lots of places where they're not concerned.
Okay, well, let me give you another example to try to bring you to some light to the darkness. I was recently watching this documentary on amp grazing, to take it back to beef. This is adaptive multi-paddock grazing. And basically what it is, ranchers start moving their cattle.
You need to date more. Honestly.
Tell me about it.
You're watching a documentary on amp grazing? You got to get laid, man.
I know.
Holy shit.
I know. It's like I sit down on my date and this is immediately what I'm talking about.
My God.
And they're check, please.
All right. No, but tell me what about amp grazing. Tell me how this works. Tell me how this is making your life better.
Well, it's what farmers do is they move their cattle in a way that mimics the way bison grazed. And so what that does is it increases the soil carbon.
Right.
So cattle ranching actually moves from becoming a net carbon producer to a net carbon sink. Right. And some of the scientists
it costs more money and takes more time.
It costs less money.
It costs less money?
It costs less money, and it's better for the bee life, the bird life, the plant life.
Okay.
Because it mimics the way natural systems work. It mimics nature. Right. And so the way we graze cattle now is basically like destroy all the grass, destroy all the soil, and then dump fertilizer on it. Right. And so there are all these ranchers talking about how we don't use fertilizer anymore because the cows do it themselves.
Right.
And so this method of grazing has suddenly come into the climate solution space, and people are trying to figure out how to scale it because by some of these scientists' estimate, you could sequester a third of the carbon that we're producing just if we move to this method.
Which brings us to Only Murders in the Building.
I love that transition.
No.
As long as we don't go back to my dating life.
No, I can't. This is, we want our listeners to be happy. Yeah. There's no happiness to be found in that subject. So let's move on to Only Murders in the Building. You work on that show?
I worked on it for 2 seasons. I moved on to another show since then.
I see. You worked on the first 2 seasons?
Yes, but because it started right when COVID started, we were on Zoom for both of those years.
Okay, so you didn't get to go into a room.
No. I barely met my co-writers until, a year into it.
Wow.
Some of them, yeah.
Was it, so I was going to say, was it fun? But that doesn't sound like any fun at all.
It was fun. It was a blast.
Why?
It's just like any writer's room where at first it was incredibly awkward. I'd never used Zoom before. None of us had. Mm-hmm. And so we're all doing that weird stop and start thing where you can't quite get the conversation to flow. But all of those folks were hilarious and incredible. And I'm still friends with all of them to this day. It was just it was my first ever television writing experience, which was, as I said earlier, in some ways incredibly odd and frustrating. Right.
It's humbling to write something and people say, this is great. And then have them change it.
Yeah. And then not a word is left.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. That is humbling, but it's the process.
No, for sure.
And that first draft, no matter how it is required to get to the next step and the next step and the next step.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I, as you discover over time, it's not your vision that matters most. It's the showrunner's vision.
Yeah.
And so they're going to get what they need one way or another.
Yeah. And that's the learning curve. That's the learning curve. But on Murders, the showrunner, John Hoffman, is the loveliest guy. And, it was, I was learning the entire time I was there. And I still am. And I think that is sort of what I had to, teach myself was can't have a sense of authorship about this. You have to have this sense of I'll put my name on this, but I understand 30 other people are going to have their moment.
It's a group mentality, and we are, as a group, heading towards that finish line, trying to give the show what it needs.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this: are you writing another book? Since you love book writing so much,
I sure do.
You're the king of your world with a book writer.
Yep.
By the way, you're the king of your world when you're showrunner too, kind of.
Well, maybe someday.
All right. Well, think about that. But so, are you deep into the next book?
Yeah, I've been working on it for a year now. So,
Is it about me?
How did you know?
I just took a guess. I don't know that it's about me.
I was I need a random podcast guy that I've never met before.
Yeah.
Don't know from Adam and just make him the center.
No, you're always on the zeitgeist, on the tip of what's edgy, and I figure that's kind of me.
Yeah.
So you probably don't want to talk about what it is, but because once you talk about it, the magic's gone. But
I'm very cagey about what I'm working on. But I'll say it's a short story collection. It's not another novel.
How has the process been writing this book versus the monolith that you finished? This
process is awesome because I spent 10 years writing 2 very dark, very long novels that were incredibly complex in plot and character and the sort of the world.
Huge sex scenes.
Yeah, the sex scenes were enormous. And This one is just like, I have a weird idea, I execute it, I move to the next one.
Right.
And so it's a real relief from sort of just like a sitting down every day, because even if it's not going well, it's like, I'll be done with this soon and I can move on to the next weird idea.
Yeah.
And so at the end of this process, I'll sort of like compile all these weird ideas and see which ones I like the most. So just like from a stress level, it's been a really big relief.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Who are your favorite authors, your favorite writers that you've...
Well, I got to mention Stephen King. I feel like when I was a kid, like
Have not heard of him.
Yeah, I'll explain in a minute.
Okay.
I was a big reader as a little kid, and then like right around age 11, I read my first Stephen King novel, and I was like gone.
Right.
Like I just read everything the guy had ever written in the space of like 3 years, and just like was obsessed. And like he's the first author that really made me want to be a writer and become serious about it.
Well, he's fantastic. He's
yeah.
one of those guys who, his track record's pretty damn good.
For sure.
I don't know if it's 100%, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Like he has written so many great things, and and the other thing, I like you, I think he likes writing. Like it's one of those things where I know very few writers who just sit down and go like, this is great.
Yeah.
Oh my God, fantastic. But I feel like he's one of them.
Yeah.
And I think like, so if you have that, God bless you.
When I was like, I think On Writing, his book about writing came out when I was like 15 or 16. And I read it and it was like, oh, this is like every thought I've ever had. This is like how I feel about this craft.
So I'm just looking for a good book. What's a good book I should read right now?
Fucking Deluge by Stephen Markley. What do you mean? Like,
I don't have the years to this. I will get to this. But I'm going to have to listen to it.
Yeah.
Because if I actually tried to read this, I'd read like a page a day.
Yeah.
And fall asleep.
Well, right now I'm reading a short story collection because I'm just going through those by a friend of mine from Iowa named Jamel Brinkley, who's a magnificent writer, and in a very envy-inducing way, I believe it was the LA Review of Books, I forget what publication it was, I think it was that, had this headline that said something like, is Jamel Brinkley the greatest short fiction writer alive? And I was like, wow, fuck this guy. But no, he's...
And is he?
He might be. He is one of the most incredible writers I've met.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's your buddy.
Yeah, we were good friends at Iowa.
Do you send him stuff?
I'll text him about basketball every now and then, but...
Okay. But you don't like read this?
No, I don't like... I haven't had anything to send to anybody in a minute.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have, a core group of people that you trust that say like, okay, read this. Tell me what's good. Tell me what's not good. You're not going to take all their notes, but you're going to hear them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's important for everybody.
Totally.
If you're working in a vacuum, you're going to wind up writing a lot of things that suck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Need the feedback.
Let's stop fighting.
I don't know why we started. Yeah.
Oh my God. He's so aggressive. Do you think this could be a movie or a miniseries?
Yeah. So I think I've thought long and hard about an adaptation.
Right.
And I think like figuring out the right format for it is important, and seeing how,
Fantastic.
As you know, though, getting anything actually to screen in this industry.
Very difficult.
Very, very difficult.
Right.
Very brain fucking.
Yeah. I mean, well, it happens though. People do it.
Apparently.
Sometimes Sisyphus rolls the boulder up the hill.
Totally.
Sometimes it happens, but it's not often, and it's not always successful. That's the other thing too. You can work for many years to make the thing, and then sometimes it just sucks.
Well, and it's just such an interesting process, because you know when you're writing a book, you get input from people,
right?
But you don't rely on any of those people, maybe except for your editor, for like the financial part of it. And so you get to, it's like the people you take notes from are going to control when this gets to the next step.
Right.
So you sort of feel compelled to follow their notes, even when you know in your heart of hearts they're terrible.
No, that's the mistake. Do not take terrible notes.
Well, that's a part of my process I'm learning out here. It's
you can address the terrible note, but don't take the terrible note. Address the note. So if somebody says something there are three kinds of notes. There is the great note. Oh my God, thank you, fantastic. There's the lateral note, and say, oh my God, thank you, fantastic. Sure. Even though in your head saying, this makes no difference, but okay. You want to change the name from Claire to Charlotte? Yes. Fantastic, all right.
Love it.
And then there's the ruining note, the bad note.
Yeah.
Don't take the bad note. Take the note underneath the note and try to address it somehow, or make them think that you're addressing the note without addressing the note. If the note was, it's a great, I like the Deluge, but we should put a talking monkey in it.
Sure.
You might say, what is that note about? Is that note about, I'm afraid it's not commercial, or I'm afraid it's not entertaining in some spots, or it's missing some laughs?
Yeah.
Like, figure out underneath that note. And sometimes you can ask them, like, please explain the talking monkey thing. Like, what is the talking monkey? What are you after here? And then they'll give you a note underneath the note, and then you may be able to address it with that stuff. But don't take the ruining note, because it's going to ruin it.
Yeah, and no, totally. And if you don't, and sometimes it doesn't get made, and I think that's like the sort of the cold reality of it.
You can't. Well, some people do. I've been in places where people just pretend like that note was never said.
Yeah,
and they just go on to the next draft, and then
like John Kennedy not answering the letter from Khrushchev during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just like it didn't happen, and then they hope that people forget, and often they do forget.
Yeah.
They do forget. But even if they didn't forget, they'll say, "Well, it's still bothering me here." The thing, and then you can hone it down.
Yeah.
But it is a collaboration, even with the executives and even with everybody else. Like, executives become executives because they like stories.
Sure.
They really do care about it. They want it to be good. They want it to be, they want their bosses to be happy. They want it to be commercially successful. They want to be able to justify their jobs, all those things. But they do want it to be good. So they're not just giving it to just, most of the time, to just give it. They want it. They have something they're trying to add.
Well, agree to partially disagree, but okay, yeah.
No, I know many people who, wanted to be writers and are executives,
Sure, yeah.
and people who, I know many executives who are smarter than many writers I've worked with, and so it really is. You have to, just because they're on the other side of the desk doesn't mean that they're necessarily the enemy.
Totally.
I hope you executives are listening and saying that Jake Hogan, he likes us.
I don't mean anyone I'm working with now, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now it's time for listener mail.
Now it's time for listener mail.
This question comes from Holly. Holly has written many questions, but they're all basically the same theme.
Yeah.
And this is the theme, which is, what do you do to overcome your fear and anxiety? And I thought, good question to ask you.
Drink? I don't know. Like, what is?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and.
I'll take some time out. Like, I'll get off email, get off my phone, take a few weeks, and just sort of, either take a vacation or just sort of chill out and try to remind myself of why I do this. And and then there's the doing it part. Like, I do think, like, for me, writing is meditative. It's a way of being creative and expressing those anxieties into a form that is useful.
Do you ever get writer's block?
No.
Okay, well, that's
I
good.
do not. I don't believe in writer's block.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because writer's block is a form of fear. So you have conquered the fear of writing.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
And now you use writing as a meditation towards other fears.
But you know what I used to tell my students when I was a teacher is that, writer's block is self-created. And if you just sit down at your, laptop or with your pen and pencil every day at the same time, and you make it a regular thing, that element of it is going to start to fade away. You're just going to get so used to putting your fingers on the keyboard and clearing your mind. Like, it's going to happen, but you have to sort of learn how to do that. You have to learn how to turn off all the distractions. Like, your phone should be on night mode at all times, right? Like, you have to learn to get all the world out of your head so you can enjoy that moment. And I just think, when people can't enjoy that moment, it's because they're letting the rest of it flood in.
What are the things other than the environment that sort of worries a talented novelist in this world?
I mean, it used to just be money,
right?
Just like surviving. I went through a long period where, it seemed like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And I had some friends now who are in that stage in life where it just doesn't feel like you can ever get over the hump and get anywhere as a writer.
Right.
And I think it's becoming more difficult to do that. The economics of book publishing and Hollywood are getting, tougher and tougher. And so, I still have that sort of residual, I'm doing well now, but that is a very aberrant feeling for me.
Well, you've ditched those jerks at Simon & Schuster and went over to HarperCollins.
Yeah, no, my editor did. I'm still at Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kept those wonderful guys at
Simon & Schuster is the best publisher ever.
Ever. Okay, fantastic. Well, I mean, it does seem like a lot less people are reading novels.
Yeah, and that does concern me. Like, I do think there's something happening to people's attention spans. I don't think that's just hype.
Right.
That is making it really difficult to sit down and enjoy, not like suffer through a book, but to enjoy it,
Right.
you know? And like, for somebody who reads constantly, I like, can't believe it when I hear people tell me they don't read.
Right.
I just think it's like one of the few places in life where like your brain can be absolutely immersed in something and your imagination is doing the work, not a Hollywood FX crew.
Right. Right.
And I just think it's so pleasurable and it's so incredible. And I do worry that people are negating that experience for sort of the facile, masturbatory fun of Instagram and TikTok. And
Don't knock
other-
masturbatory fun. It's my stock trade. No, I really enjoy. I listen to books. I read books too, but I also listen to books because of the way my brain works, and I love them. And I really do. I'm always looking for something great and something new and something fantastic. Trying to think the last book, Wolf Hall, the trilogy,
Okay,
Wolf
yeah,
Hall
yeah.
trilogy. It's like, fantastic.
Yeah.
I want more.
Yeah.
And then I want something else and I want something else. I want to find different novels that I would fall in love with and really enjoy.
Yeah, totally. And I right now I'm also starting a book about Bruce Springsteen, The Making of Nebraska, called Deliver Me from Nowhere, which I'm obsessed with Bruce Springsteen, and
Why?
he's the greatest like rock and roll musician ever. I mean,
Okay.
what's the
No, it's interesting. No, it's fine, but it's you're younger than the Bruce Springsteen.
You go to his concerts, man, and you're like, you see like fucking 7-year-olds there who are freaking out about it.
Right.
Like, he spans some generations, you know.
He does, but mostly they're my age.
Yeah.
Honestly, mostly they're people in their 60s or 50s, whatever, and I always make the same joke, which is everybody at the Bruce Springsteen concert who's like, he plays Born to Run. Nobody there is born to run.
Yeah.
Everybody there is staying right where they are, and they're going back to their insurance job at the next day.
For sure.
But it was when I was in high school, he was like, yeah, we're going to get on our motorcycles and get out of this place and live a life of adventure. And, it was a great American mythology that he was selling.
You know, I discovered him in high school when he was basically not putting out albums anymore. Right. And then, he came out with The Rising like 2 years after I'd started to become obsessed with him.
Right.
And then has been putting out albums ever since. And I've been to like 15 concerts at this point.
He's great.
And I just think he's a fucking beautiful writer.
I just read Ed Zwick's book. Do you know who Ed Zwick is? The movie director, producer?
Yes, of course.
Fantastic book. Really great insight into movie making.
His memoir?
It's a memour, yeah. It's kind of a memoir but it details his career with his partner, Marshall Herskovitz.
That sounds excellent.
Trying to get him on the show, but he's kind
of big.
He's kind of big.
Yeah.
You were really easy to get on the show. I don't know.
So simple. I'll show up to anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was so surprised.
I'm doing a quinceañera after this.
I don't even remember asking you.
Yeah.
You just showed up. That's amazing.
Yeah.
A moment of joy.
This is a segment when we ask our guests what brings them joy. You seem like a guy who has no joy in your life. So I really want to find out. What brings you joy.
No, I have loads of joy.
Tell me.
The other day was having a phone conversation with my friend Madeline George, who is a great playwright, and she's also was a writer on Only Murders in the Building, which is how we met. And I'd given her a piece to read for me and sort of give me her thoughts on. And we just ended up having, like sort of a wide-ranging, half hour, 45-minute conversation. And I was just, oh my God, this was fantastic. I walked away from that conversation feeling good about life.
Yeah.
And Madeline's one of these people who is also like, she works in a prison. She teaches, tries to work towards getting incarcerated people college degrees. And just one of these people who is relentless about, doing better in the world while also creating interesting art.
So there you go. This is fantastic. You connected.
Yeah.
And connected for a solid amount of time. That is so refreshing. That is what we all need.
Absolutely.
I'm desperate for people, and including myself, to find connection with anybody or anything, because it's the mother's milk, or it's the green energy of our life. But I mean, that's fantastic. I'm glad you have that moment of joy, and I hope you have many moments of joy like that. I too like to connect with people on a daily basis. Otherwise, I feel like I lose my humanity.
For sure.
And it sucks.
Yeah.
I don't like be depressed and sad. You don't want to see that.
Let's not do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you do not want to see that.
I sometimes just watching NBA basketball from like 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night without interruption. That's also
What's your
that is
team?
being alone. The Cavs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, they're having a good year. They're having a
Okay.
good year. Yeah.
All right. Is that going to go all the way?
No, definitely not.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, good. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. And thank you for being here. My internet friends, or how do you listen to me on the internet? I don't know how this comes by radio. I'm not sure. Anyway, thank you for listening, and make sure that you are not alone. Go share something with someone. I don't give a shit who, but don't be alone. Spend some time with somebody. Go to meet somebody. Don't live your life listening to this dumb podcast. All right. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.